I'm Tom Johnson, Thomas Johnson Antique Furniture Restoration in Gorham, Maine. I've been restoring furniture for over 40 years and restoring furniture here on YouTube for over 10 years. Some viewers have noticed our some viewers have noticed our attempts at clickbait titles and thumbnail images. Well, like it or not, and I don't always love it myself, those titles and images work. Here on YouTube, it doesn't matter how good your video is if nobody clicks on it and watches it. So today we put together a compilation of videos that we originally published with simple descriptive titles and quiet, normal thumbnails that we, my editor and I, thought were very interesting, but they never performed up to expectations. I like watching these videos that some of our subscribers may have missed the first time around. I hope you enjoy them too. If you like what you see, what we do here, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. On to the show. Okay? I'm Tom Johnson, Thomas Johnson Antique Furniture Restoration in Gorham, Maine. This is a Lion and Healy pedal harp. It's not an antique, but it's in good shape, except it did take a fall and suffer some cosmetic damage, but bad cosmetic damage right here. I've got to fill this area in, smooth it out, and repaint this area black. Okay, so the first step would be to tape off the harp, but actually before I do that, I'm going to put some epoxy stick in this damaged area. It could be drying while I tape off the rest of it. All right, so now I'll start sanding with 100 grit. See, this feels nice and smooth. It even feels level. But that little black line around the edge there tells me I'm not level. In fact, I'm not really level until it's not black but white wood like that. Alright, I've sanded to 150 and now I'm going to spray it with a black satin aerosol. So over the course of the next, say 4 hours, I'll spray 2 more coats on it. And then tomorrow I'll sand it again. Alright, as I said, I sprayed a few more coats on it. I've let it dry overnight. It's amazing because it looks really good. You know, my main concern was just, spraying this with an aerosol. How is it going to blend this in? And it is a satin aerosol. It looks great, but I can feel it, and it's not completely smooth. I need to sand it with some 500. I think I can get rid of this tape, sand this area, and spray it maybe just one more time. And I do have a few little faint sand throughs right there, which is a good thing because that means those were high spots. All right, I hope this coat dries as well as the last coat did. Okay, I've let this dry actually for a couple days now. The black aerosol worked really well. Visually, the sheen and everything is perfect. I can still feel a little bit of fuzziness around the edges, but I have some black medium grade compound here. So I'm going to remove all my tape and then compound this a little bit. See if I can finish it up. Now the compound's starting to dry. Now that I've compounded it, now I can see I've got two little drips right there. I got to sand them out. So I'm going to take a little 1200 and water, see if I can sand those out. They might be gone, but you never really know until you polish it again. That looks pretty good. We'll let it dry for a while, and while that's going on, I'll take the cover off, blow this off, and polish it with some furniture polish. All right. There you go, beautiful pedal harp. It had fallen over, the end of it was really badly damaged, but you know, I looked out. My can of aerosol satin lacquer really matched up with the sheen. It looks really good. I should say it looks pretty good. I'm Tom Johnson, Thomas Johnson Antique Furniture Restoration in Gorham, Maine. This is a nice reproduction mahogany tilt-top table. And it's got a nice inlay in the top. The main thing that's wrong with it is that this foot is broken. So I've got to repair that, and also there's some scratches in the top. I've got to try to take care of those too. The first thing I want to do is remove the top and set it aside for safekeeping. Yeah, so you can clearly see it's been repaired before. There's a ton of glue on the surface. There's a couple of dowels that someone drilled in from the bottom. They didn't really do any good. So the first thing to do, as always, is to get the heat gun and get this glue off of here. You know, given the fact that I don't feel that even though I got 99% of the glue off of here, or maybe 90% of the glue, and the alignment with these dowels really doesn't seem bad at all, I feel like I'm not going to get a perfect fit, and I'm going to use epoxy. Okay, we'll see you tomorrow. So the foot is great. It's like a rock. But still, I'm not wild about this whole joint. I've decided I want to cut a spline in from the bottom. So I want to use a router to cut this spline. I'm trying to figure out how I can hold this base in place so that I can set up my template to guide the router. And so I just started fooling around with pieces of scrap wood to figure out how I could set this up. And so this is what I came up with. So I've still got to support the template, which will guide the router. Every time I make a template, I keep it, so I have tons of different templates over here. And so I've cut some boards just the right height that will support this template over the leg.
While the putty sets up, we can get started on the top. So this top looks great. It's got a nice finish on it, but it got a few scratches in it. One kind of long bad one, and then some smaller ones. Now we have no idea what this finish is. It looks like a modern finish. This has probably been refinished at some point. You can feel the scratch. There's no way it's ever going to go away. But there's lots of minor defects in the top. I thought I'd start by just putting a little lacquer thinner just on the scratch, see if that kind of melts it in a little bit. I'll try the smaller scratch first. It's funny, it seems to, at least from my angle, it seems to go away when it's wet, but then comes back a little bit. So maybe I need to use a little dye stain instead of lacquer thinner. It's funny, from my angle I can't even see this, but you can see it in the camera. But this seems to be working fine. When you have little chips like this that have turned white, associate that with nitrocellulose lacquer. And that's why I think that the dye stain, will bond to that. Alcohol-based dye stain will bond to that. Okay, back to the repair. Okay, I've sanded the whole repair area with 100 grit paper. Now I'm going to sand everything again with 150 and then 220. And especially with the 220, I'll expand my sanding a little bit more onto the finished areas to prepare them for shellac and lacquer. Okay, now I'm going to stain the repair area with some extra dark walnut dye stain. The great thing about dye stain is now I can go back and add more stain to the lighter areas.
So while I'm waiting for that stain to dry, I'm going to wax the top. I'm going to use a dark brown wax, and I'm going to try to work it into that crack a little bit, see if it helps fill it. You know, I'm not doing anything to that crack to try to make it go away. It's impossible. There's a lot of different methods you could use. I guarantee you by the time you were done, you'd end up refinishing the whole top because it will never blend in. So I'm going to wax it. I'm going to try to fill that with this paste wax as much as it can. Now I'm going to seal the repair area with some shellac using this aerosol. We use shellac because it's a good sealer. I want to fill in the pores and level this off. And it's also compatible with the old finish that's on here that I'll be spraying also. I put a second coat of shellac on here off camera and dried for a few hours now. Looks good. I'm going to go over it now with a gray Scotch-Brite pad. All right, now I'll give it a coat of satin lacquer. I'll go over the pedestal base here with the same dark wax I used on the top, and that'll help even more with all those little wear marks I was touching up on the other feet. So there you have it. A very nice little mahogany tilt top table. It's a reproduction, but a really nice piece of furniture. And of course the main thing wrong was that one of these feet. I think it's that one. I think that foot was broken. I repaired it, and then of course did touched up a lot of scratches and wear and tear. And you know, for everyone out there who does furniture repair has run into this kind of break so many times. It's very difficult to know what to do with. That's the best solution I've come up with. I've got about 5 hours in this job. I don't know how it breaks down to that repair and the other work I did. But in any case, it looks pretty good. I'm Tom Johnson, Thomas Johnson Antique Furniture Restoration in Gorham, Maine. This is a really nice tabletop, satinwood veneer. It's not just a regular sunburst pattern. This highly figured veneer you can see is in like a compass pattern with the same veneer but slightly different figure, not as bold, filling in these parts here. And the problem with this table is the edge. The edge is veneered also, and there's a lot of veneer chipped away. Some loose veneer. It also is not finished to the same level as the top. So I've got to repair all this veneer. I'll get someone to help me put this on a bench and then get the veneer and start repairing it. really nice maple. It's even got a little bit of curl to it, a little bit of figure. And you know, I'm not sure what the wood is on this edge exactly, but it looks plain like maple. It's kind of grainy. But I noticed that this veneer too has, for maple, is kind of grainy. I think it's gonna work fine. So the first thing I want to do is set up and cut some strips of this veneer the same width as the edge of the table. So when working with veneer like this, especially when you're cutting it across grain, the pieces you cut become very weak, so you want to back them up with some tape. And the edge of the table measures exactly 1 inch, and I have some 1-inch tape here, so that makes it pretty convenient. I'll be able to actually mark off the strips with the tape. I hope you can see, I think you could in the close-up, the top veneer goes over the top edge of the banding veneer on the edge. In other words, they veneered this edge first, then this veneer went over. So I'm trying to leave that edge of veneer right here that's sticking out over my patch, and I'll try to get my patch up under that little ledge right there. So I'm getting ready to glue down the veneer to the edge. I'm going to use these clamps, 3-way clamps, designed for doing this kind of a job. I'm going to put down a piece of tape here. I've got to protect the surface of the tabletop. A piece of tape, folded sandpaper, a piece of wood. I've already put the wooden sandpaper underneath. Then I'll position my veneer in place. I'll use hide glue, position it in place, and then put my clamps on. I've got a thin piece of 16th inch aluminum and a piece of bending plywood to use as a caul. Okay, I've let this dry overnight. Let's see what we got. All right, that looks good. So now I'm just going to start working my way right around the table. I've got some, that was probably the largest patch. I have others. Most of them are pretty small. So on some of these smaller pieces, I'm going to use a new kind of clamp that I got called a bandy clamp. I've run out of edge clamps, but the clamping time on the hide glue is pretty short, so I'll just take my first clamp off. It's been on for a couple hours. I think this glue, as long as it clamps on for about an hour, that's probably okay. Although I'll let it dry overnight before I work on it. But the clamping time is relatively short. Alright, that's 20 veneer patches. And so now I've got to sand them. So the next step is to trim the patches, where they overhang. I'll do that with the chisel. And then I'll sand. I'm going to sand with 100 grit. And that initial sanding, I'll sand with the grain. And of course the grain runs vertically. Okay, once I'm done with 100, there's a lot of little spaces and gaps, like along here, even one there, that I'm going to fill with wood putty. Okay, I finished sanding all my repairs with 100 grit in the direction of the grain. So now I'm going to sand with 150, and now also I'm going to sand against the grain. I'm going to sand this way. And as long as I do that just with 150 and then really well with 220, it'll be fine. Scratch marks won't show. It gets a very light stain. It'll work fine. There's a lot of areas here where not where my repairs were, where the original veneer meets the top, and there's a little gap there, and I'm going to try to, I'm trying to, as I go along, fill those with a little family wood. Okay, I've done the whole edge, all my repairs with 150. Now I'll do it all again with 220, and I'm sanding with 220 until I can see my scratch marks like from the 150, and I can see them disappearing with the 220. Okay, I finished sanding with 220, and yesterday I glued up a piece of the same veneer that I used for the edge, and I've sanded it to 220, and I'm going to try some stains out on it. The first stain I'm going to try is some light golden oak. The color's good. It's a little light, but I like light. I'd rather have light than too dark. I think I may try this on the table itself. And if it's light, that's okay. I'll seal it with shellac and then add a little more color to it. Okay, I've let the stain dry for a couple minutes, and now I'll wipe it off. I'll kind of pat it off. Remember, the stain was light, so I don't want to wipe it off too much. Now this is fast drying stain. I'll set the timer and let it dry for an hour. So the stain is dried, and so now I'll apply a coat of shellac. And first I'll put a coat on the sample. Well, that looks pretty good. I was hoping to have a little bit more of a yellowing effect. Doesn't seem to have much effect, but I'll put my first coat of shellac on, and then I'll see what I can do about the color. It's not changing the color too much, the shellac is not, but my new wood is lighter than the old wood, and that's what's important. I'll go back after the shellac dries and then figure out exactly what I'm going to do to blend it in. The initial coat of shellac has dried, so now I've got to add a little color. You can see my new patch it's a good color, but the wood surrounding it is a little bit darker, a little bit grainy, and that's good. So I'm going to add, I'm going to try first to add a little bit of raw umber color to some shellac and apply that just to the patches. First, I'm going to go over this with a 500 paper, just lightly. It may be a little too dark. I'm not sure. I can always add some more shellac, but I'm going to try it anyway. I can always, wipe it off. Yeah, it is a little dark, but by then wiping it slightly, it gives me a little bit of that grainy effect and blends in pretty well. In fact, when I stood back a little bit, I had a hard time even spotting where this was. So I think I'm just going to keep going like this and wipe it off as needed. Actually, I seem to have just the right amount on the brush now, and it goes on pretty well without even the need to wipe. As I work my way around the whole perimeter here, there's lots of areas, even where I didn't work, the old veneer, where there's color variations. There's a lot of color variation in this edge, and so I'm able to even go and touch up some of these light spots too, and take the curse off them a little bit. A lot of different areas. The touch-ups look good. It's funny, when I'm up close like that, I can really see a lot of variation. When you stand back and look at it, it looks a lot better, thank goodness. So what I'm going to do though is I'm going to take some light golden oak aerosol toner, and I'm actually going to go over this entire edge, and that will, I think that will like really pull it all together. Yeah, that was definitely a good move. In fact, some of these areas I may hit a second time. I'll let this dry a bit, and then I'll check it again and hit it wherever I think it might be necessary. But it's really looking good now. Okay, I've let the golden oak dry for about a half an hour. And now I'm going to spray it again, but with clear gloss lacquer. Okay, I'm about ready for the final step on the edge, but the first thing I'm going to do is clean the top. It's not bad, but I'm going to go over it. There was a little even gras doux on it when I picked it up. So I've got some cleaner I buy at the hardware store, and this is an industrial paper towel. You spray the cleaner directly onto the towel, not onto the top itself. Okay, I've cleaned it. Now I'm going to go over the top. This is just an extra fine buffing compound that you use by hand, and I'm just going to go over the top quickly, make sure that the shine is completely back, especially on the edge here where I was working and might have a little bit of overspray. This will take it right off. Now for the final step on the edge of the table, I'm just going to French polish it. I'm going to use a product that's made for French polishing. there we go. This beautiful satinwood compass design top. There's really nothing wrong with the top itself. The edge had a lot of problems, and geez, I think it looks pretty good. I'm Tom Johnson, Thomas Johnson Antique Furniture Restoration in Gorham, Maine. This is a nice little chair, a child's chair. It's oak in a what we call mission style, probably from the early part of the 20th century. It looks like it's been stored in a barn or a basement for some time. It's all original, but it is kind of dirty and rough. The seat is this little upholstered slip seat, and that material, we need to recover it. On the bottom of the seat is the manufacturing company, Goshen Manufacturing. But when I found their catalogs online, all I saw was their outdoor equipment and stuff. I didn't see any interior furniture like this, but they do make lots of outdoor equipment for children. So what I want to do is clean it up, see if I can make it look a lot better, revive the original finish, and recover this seat. The chair seems tight, and it's basically just screwed together anyway, although I imagine there's some dowels or something in some of these joints. So let's clean it. I'm going to use a very mild solution of my favorite cleaner here. Just like 1/8 of a cup in almost a quart of water. I'm going to try it out a little on a place that doesn't show much, like right under the seat here. It's funny, it appears to be finished. It certainly doesn't seem to be hurting the finish. It brightened it up quite a bit. I'm going to switch to a white rag so I can see if anything's coming off on it. And now I'll try the back of these legs, see what happens there. I don't see a tremendous amount of dirt and stuff coming off on the rag, but it certainly looks brighter when it's wet, which is good. And all the parts of the finish that are bumpy and alligator, they're still intact. It didn't affect that in any way, and that's probably good right now. I want to try scrubbing it with a gray Scotch-Brite pad, just a little bit. But it looks beautiful. I feel like I can proceed now and clean the entire chair. At first I thought this was just my imagination, but some of that bumpiness, those dark bumps, which are an alligator finish, they seem to be getting a little bit better as I scrub, which might be my imagination. We'll see. So when it's wet, it has a really good color. I'm going to let it dry overnight, and then tomorrow we'll fool around with it some more. A fair amount of dirt came off that chair. Wow, the chair looks great, just clean. Looks really good. One thing I noticed yesterday though, before I go to the next step, a lot of these sharp corners have worn and they're kind of splintery. So I need to smooth those with a little bit of 220 and stain them. I don't want to like completely round them over, but I don't want to feel the sharp edges like I'm getting ready to get a splinter. Now I'll go over those corners with a marker, medium oak, and I think it's just the right color. All right, now I'll just let this sit for a little while. Well, the chair just keeps looking better and better. It looks great, but I still have the problem of roughness. It feels rough. It's those little pebbly type bits of finish that have crawled up. Some areas are really rough. I think what I want to do is take some Watco Danish oil and some 600 black paper and wet sand it with the Watco. We'll experiment on this black leg. You can really see how pebbly it is here. All these dots of finish which have sort of crawled up together. And we'll just do a little experiment. This is Watco with walnut stain. It's walnut Watco. I don't expect all those little dots of the rough finish to go away. I just want it to feel better. Definitely feels better. It's not, 100% smooth, but a lot better. And this may be the worst part, this leg here. I think I'll do the whole chair. You can even hear the roughness going away. We'll let this dry overnight. And when you're using an oil finish like this, everything I've used, the sandpaper, the rags, this cup, everything goes outside. I'll just spread it out on the ground and let it dry, and then put it in a trash can outside. You definitely need to get all this stuff out of your house or your shop. Okay, now we can turn our attention towards the seat. You know, upholstery is a fine, time-honored trade, and I have the greatest respect for all upholsterers. My upholsterer said for me to do this myself, so I apologize to the upholsterers out there. I'm going to give it a shot. My idea is to preserve the original upholstery, just as a record of, if anyone ever wants to know what it was. I'm going to cover this with a piece of this thin foam, and then really I just have to tack on, this is another artificial leather type product, similar to what's on there, and I just need to tack it on. So I've scraped these areas here. There's just, stuff in there. Now I'm going to wax it. Just I know the seat's going to be tight. Yeah, it's tight, but it's fitting fine. Good. Good. Okay, great. It's taken a few days for that oil to completely dry. It's just been super humid lately. That's why I did the seat first. And now I'm just going to go over the entire chair with 4/0 steel wool and this orange oil beeswax polish. All right, I'm going to let this dry, and after lunch I'll buff it down. Then I've got to go over some of these corners again with the marker. There you go, nice little mission oak chair. You know, there's something about children's furniture and miniature furniture that people find very appealing. And of course, this chair was not in terrible shape. It was just kind of sad looking. It was dirty and worn. And we re-oiled it, smoothed it out with wax. It feels great. New fabric for the seat. I think it looks pretty good. I'm Tom Johnson, Thomas Johnson Antique Furniture Restoration in Gorham, Maine. This is a nice old box. It's just that, just a box. The owner's grandfather built it, and probably as a utility box of some sort, but as a child it was used as a toy box, and so we're going to call it a toy box. And the main thing that's happened here is that the hinges broke off. The back board broke off where the hinges attach. So that's what's got to be repaired. And it looks like it's been maybe kept in a basement for a while, And so it really needs to be cleaned inside and out. It's got what looks like might be some mold issues on this side. I'll be mixing up paint to do the touch-ups in the back after I've repaired it. And I'm a little unsure what we're going to do about the paint. I'll do the repairs, mix up paint to touch that up, and see if we do anything else to the front of it. But it basically needs to be cleaned inside and out. So I got some paint from the hardware store. It's not the exact right color. I'm going to have to adjust it. But in the meantime, this evening, I'm going to put some paint on the, just a first coat to get this sealed. I'll have to fool around with the paint more tomorrow. All right, the paint has dried overnight. I'm going to sand it and let's see if we can get a better color. So this is acrylic interior house paint, and I have acrylic colors, and I'm going to see if I can bring it closer to what we see on the back here. I'll try some black. That seems the most obvious choice. Getting there. More black, and I think I'll put raw umber in also. I think I better transfer to a larger container here. I'm going to put some paint back into the smaller container, just a little bit, and I'm going to mix my umber in that. Boy, I think I'm really good. I won't really know till I paint some on and let it dry. I'll let that dry. All right, this is dried. I think it looks good. Color's good. Kind of wondering if it's not a little bit too dark, but it's darker down here. This is the worst side. I'm going to paint this and see what it looks like. I'm just going to give it a quick sand. I'm not trying to get rid of defects. In fact, I want to leave all the defects in the paint. I'm just sort of knocking off the loose stuff. I'm even going to wipe this off with a damp cloth, and then I'll paint it. Now see, I could kind of wipe the paint off some too, if I wanted that look. I actually kind of like that. Well, I'm really liking this, the way it looks, how all the defects look. It comes across as not being as dark as the back, but I can always just darken up this edge a little bit, transition a little bit better. But the thing I like this. I don't know if the customer's going to like it or not, but I can always put more paint on. In fact, eventually, if I wanted less, I could scrub off less too, but I'm kind of liking this a lot. Of course, I got to go over the back to get all these raw wood painted too, but the back and the other side definitely have more paint on them. But I'm going to do it like this. I can always paint it again if we decide to. I like this though. Okay, I need to just clean the sawdust out of the interior. I need to stain my new wood back here and attach the lid. This is why we save old screws. Now I want to add a chain to this lid to keep it from falling all the way back, which is probably why it broke. And I saw some indication that there used to be something on here. That should do it. So here we have it, this nice antique box. I say antique, we don't really know how old it is. The owner's grandfather made it. The kids used it as a toy box, hence the sentimental value of Grandpa's toy box. And it came out of the basement. We got it cleaned up. I ragged this paint on. We're not sure if that's the final finish or not. We have to figure a way for the owner to come in here, and we're going to discuss this and see exactly what we want it to be. But it looks great now. It's nice and clean. Added a chain. I think it looks pretty good. I'm Tom Johnson, Thomas Johnson Antique Furniture Restoration in Gorham, Maine. This is a really nice chair. It's a Queen Anne style chair. It's a reproduction, but it was very badly damaged in a move. This leg was completely broken off. Now, I've got a lot of really good clean glue surface here. I think it'll glue back really well if I can clamp it. That's the real issue here. So my first thought as I look at this is maybe I should remove this piece, the top of the leg, or the back of the leg here, but I still have the same problem with clamping. In fact, even more difficulty with clamping this. I think I'm going to pull back this cambric from underneath and see what I've got behind here to clamp to. Now I've got some room in here where I can places I can possibly put a clamp on. Alright, now I'm thinking that maybe I should make a block that will fit right here where I can get clamping pressure straight across. I want the pressure to be perpendicular to this break. I've got a few clamping points here I think I can use. So I've got a cutoff from a 2x4 here that I think might work well. If I can cut this out and shape it to fit around this knee, might just be able to clamp it. It's not bad. I need to angle this cut in there. Okay, that's not bad. I need to take some off of these corners here. All right, not bad. I think I'll take it to the sander and take a little bit more off here. Maybe a little, change that angle a little bit. All right, I think I've got as good a fit as I'm going to get. I've got quite a few contact points there. I'm not sure it's perpendicular to the break. It's close. I think I need to take a little bit more off in here and here, and then I'm going to see what I got. Feels solid already. See if I can get a couple more clamps on it. Boy, this seems really good. It's really solid. It's kind of exceeded my expectations. Let's check for squareness. It's off by about a ½ inch. Now we don't know what it was originally, but I could try pulling this leg a little bit. Yeah, but if I pull this leg in with a clamp, I can see it's opening up my joint up here. Okay, even though these legs may measure out of square, we don't even know if they were ever square, number one. But they look really good to me, just looking at them, using my own judgment. I'm not going to worry about that measurement. It's not worth pulling this in and possibly messing up my good glue joint there. Now I've got a lot of really good, clean glue surface here, and also I feel like I've got good clamping pressure, so I feel like the best glue to use is regular yellow carpenter's glue. Yeah, I think it looks good. The legs look nice and square where they're supposed to be. Just going to leave it like that. Boy, it seems nice and strong. All right, now I got to move on to the issue of the broken arm. I realized once I glued this up I wouldn't be able to move it, so I thought I'd better get it off the table saw. Even though there's a big crack here, the arm seems amazingly strong. I have no idea how I was going to clamp this with the, this is so sculptural in here. But it seems that if I pull this at this area, it really comes together. Maybe I'll need to clamp it here. Boy, this joint has really come together well. Yeah, I think I'm just going to go with this. Well, this seems really solid, so we'll find out tomorrow. Seems good and strong. And there's tape residue all over both these legs. We'll see if some paint thinner will take it off. There's a lot of dings and scrape marks. There's white paint all over the other arm, this arm. Looks like somebody tried to squeeze it through a doorway or something. Who knows? Now both of these repair areas I will sand really well. I did first with 100, then 150, and then I'm going to sand really well with 220. Before I start fooling around with stain, I'm going to sand this entire leg with 220, along with both arms and the other leg. I'm going to end up recoating them entirely. They're so scuffed up. And I'll sand them with this 220 gold. Then after the 220, I'll go over everything with a gray Scotch-Brite pad. Now I'll wipe off all the sanding residue with some paint thinner. Boy, the sanded area blends in really well, even just with the paint thinner. So now I'm going to take a little bit of medium brown walnut dye stain. I'm going to thin it out with some alcohol and try patting it on those repair areas. And actually, I've got an area under here I can experiment on. You can see as the stain flashes off, this looks lighter again, but that doesn't matter. It looked great when it was wet. I'll let this dry for about an hour. All right, I'm going to spray all these areas now with a coat of shellac. You'll notice that the stained areas, where the areas where I sanded rather, and then stained, still look light, but that doesn't matter to me. They looked great when it was wet. I'll go with the shellac. If they need a little more color, I'll tone it in. All right, I'll let the shellac dry for an hour or two. It looks good. I have a little bit of toning and a little bit of touch-up work to do. My repair areas really soaked up the shellac. I'm going to hit just those areas with another coat. Yeah, that second coat really helped a lot. That sealed it up now. So I'm going to sand these repaired areas with some 500 gold. So there's just a little bit of putty I've got to touch up. I'm going to use the same dye stain that I used to stain the bare wood with, and it'll take fine over the shellac. And then I'm going to tone. I don't think I need to tone this one. I need to do a little bit of toner with medium brown walnut right there. The toner, these spray lacquers are acrylic lacquers, so when I say toner, this is acrylic lacquer, but it's got the medium brown walnut dye stain mixed in it. Alright, I let those touch-ups dry. I'm going to go over the entire chair now with a Scotch-Brite pad and then spray it with gloss lacquer. Well, this is dried overnight and it looks great. These areas I sanded need a lot more finish. I need to build up the finish just in these two areas until I can level it off and then put a final coat of satin on the entire chair. Alright, I've sprayed these areas with a few more coats, let it dry overnight. I'm going to sand these areas with some 500 paper that's very fine, but I definitely don't want to cut through. And then I'm going to go over everything with a Scotch-Brite pad and then give everything a coat of satin lacquer. Well, everything looks good. The back legs were not damaged in the move. I need to go over those with the 4-0 steel wool and the orange oil beeswax polish. And I'm just going to go over everything. It'll just make it extra smooth and extra nice. I'm just applying very light to medium, even pressure. You know, these surfaces are fine. They don't need a lot. Alright, now I'm going to wash my hands really well. I don't want any oil on them. And I'm going to remove all the plastic and paper. Just a side note, I will be reusing this plastic bag and the plastic sheeting too. I try to use everything as many times as I can. So there you go, a really nice Queen Anne armchair. If you remember, in a cross-country move, it was pretty badly damaged. This leg was completely broken off. This leg was also cracked in here, although it didn't come detached. You know, working on this chair, I really came to appreciate the sculptural, beauty of this chair. There's not a straight line in it. I think it looks pretty good.